Hello and welcome to the next lesson in the Master the Elastic Stack, all you need to get started with the Elastic Stack. In this video we're going to be installing and configuring Logstash and Filebeat to be able to ingest the syslogs of a firewall into the cluster. So far we did an introduction about the Elastic Stack, set up a new cluster, configure security, and now we're going to send data to the cluster to be able to start analyzing and searching the data. We are covering the fourth topic in the course outline, ingesting data into Elasticsearch, and from the learning objectives we need to be able to install and configure Logstash and Filebeat to ingest data into Elasticsearch. This is how the data is going to flow in this demo. We need a data source or sources. In my demo it's going to be the syslogs from my home firewall, or it could be the servers, it could be network devices or endpoints, and they will send their different kinds of logs or audits or event logs to be indexed in Elasticsearch. But before they arrive in Elasticsearch in their default format, we need to parse them and filter them and transform these logs to be indexed properly. And that's why we will set up Logstash and Filebeat to show you two different options of ingesting the syslogs into Elasticsearch. Logstash is recommended to be installed on a different machine, especially if we have a lot of logs being ingested and transformed. Filebeat is a lightweight software that can be installed on the monitored machine itself or on a separate machine in case we are monitoring or sending logs from a network device that we can't install software on. Filebeat can be installed on a separate machine and receive those logs to process them and send them to Elasticsearch. In the demo, I'm going to be showing you both options, setting up Logstash and setting up Filebeat, but this is just a quick comparison between the two. Logstash can be used for data processing and transformation, for more complex log formats and filtering and data enriching. You build filters in a custom configuration file. You specify the input, which is the data source, and the filters that will help you transform your data, and then the output, which is going to be Elasticsearch. Filebeat is a lightweight data shipper that uses built-in modules for common data sources such as Windows servers, Cisco devices, and different firewall vendors. You can install it on the monitored machine, or you can install it separately on a different machine and set it up to receive the logs from the source or the network device and then send them to Elasticsearch after processing them. Now we'll jump to the command line. I have a virtual machine that is going to be acting as my processing server or ingestion server. I'm going to install Logstash, and then I'm going to install Filebeat and demo both options. Now in this section of the demo we're going to be installing and configuring Logstash to ingest the syslogs of a firewall and then send them to Elasticsearch. Logstash requires Java. We can use an open source distribution such as OpenJDK. And the command to install it is yum install java 1.8 OpenJDK. Press yes and wait for the installation. And when the installation of Java is finished, we can start installing Logstash. I'm going to be installing Logstash from the yum repository. So first I'm going to be downloading and installing a public signing key, and then we'll create this file . And we'll add the following. We'll save this file, and then all we have to do is run the command yum install Logstash. Now if we press the command like this, it will fetch the latest version of Logstash, but I'm running Elasticsearch 8.14.3. I'm going to download the same release or the same version of Logstash, so I'm going to specify 8.14.3. Here's the version I want, and I will press yes, and it will download and install. Now on my home firewall, I'm going to set up or show you the syslog setup, and all I have to do is enable syslog and send to this IP address and this UDP port. And this IP address is for the Logstash machine, or the machine that is running Logstash. And all I have to do on Logstash is open this port on the firewall, and it will start receiving the syslogs from this firewall. Now that Logstash is finished installing, I'm going to run the command firewall command add port equal 5141 UDP. I'm going to reload, and we can double check that the firewall port is open, and here it is, 5141. Now the next thing we need to do is to create a configuration file in Logstash to start creating the filters that will parse the received logs. So we're going to etc logstash confd, and I'm going to call it firewall.conf. The Logstash configuration file consists of 3 parts. The input plugin, this is where you enable a specific source of events to be read by Logstash. The filters, this is what you want to do and how you want to parse and transform your data. And the output is where you want to send the data. In our case, it's going to be to Elasticsearch. So I'm going to copy paste the configurations from a text file on the side. I'll explain them briefly and then I'll include them in the description box. So the host is the IP address of this machine, and it's receiving the logs on port 5141. Now the filters are a few. I'm going to paste them all and I'm going to explain them one by one. But before I do that, I'm going to duplicate this window and show you how the logs are received right now before I set up any filters. So I opened a new session of the same server. I'm going to run Logstash manually just to see how the data are being received right now. I'm going to select the file, and actually I'm going to add the -R option to reload the configurations automatically if I do any changes in the configuration file. And actually it won't show any data before I change in the output section here. I'm going to specify it's going to standard output and add this output plugin. I'm going to save the configuration file and move back to the other window. And there we go. This is an example of one document or one event that is coming from the firewall. We have the timestamp. This is the time that Logstash ingested this event. We have the message. This is the syslog. We have syslog priority value here. We have inside of it the date and time, device name. We can look at some data source IP, the source port, destination IP, and then event original. This is another field, which is the copy of this same one. We have the version of the document and the host that is sending the data. We have to clean up this document with the filters in Logstash to be able to ingest cleaner data. I'm going to run Logstash again manually. I'm going to the other window. I'll go back and I will add the filters. So these are some filter plugins. This is one filter plugin, this is another one, this is another one, and so on. So the Grok filter plugin parses log messages using a pattern in the message field, and then it's going to overwrite it and write it in a field. It's also called a message. And then we're going to do a mutate filter, which performs various operations such as removing unnecessary fields, this timestamp that is not used right now, and then the host, which includes that host IP, the version of the document, and the event, which is similar to a message, and then the log field. And then we're going to use the KV or the key value filter plugin which splits the fields based on key value pairs in the message using spaces as separators. And after we separate the fields into key value pairs, we're going to do another mutate filter. We're going to remove the message, which is going to be that big chunk of data. And then we're going to add a field that contains the value of date and time from the syslog itself. And then we're going to use a date filter plugin to match the value of log date and format it in this format, year and then month and then day and then the hour or the time. And then we're going to specify the time zone, and the target is going to be this new timestamp. Now every document to be indexed in Elasticsearch, it needs this @timestamp field. So we removed this one here. This is the time that Logstash ingested the document in, or the log. But this timestamp is the actual time from the syslog message. And then we're going to do another mutate filter, and we're removing log date because we don't need it anymore, and then date and time. And then we're going to do a conversion for the type of received bytes and sent byte fields and make them integers so we can do some mathematical operations. And now the last part is adding the output. Right now we're sending to the console. Now we're going to add the Elasticsearch output plugin, which is going to be sending the parsed logs to Elasticsearch. So we'll add the Elasticsearch plugin, and we're going to specify the hosts, our Elasticsearch nodes. We'll name the index, firewall, and this is the date of today. Specify the username and password, and we're going to enable SSL, and we'll point to the CA cert, which I copied over from my CA server, which in previous video I configured node 1 to be the CA. So I'm going to save this file, and I'm still printing to the output, or to the standard output to the console, and you can see now the fields are much cleaner. And now if we log into our Kibana instance and we go all the way down to stack management and click on index management here, and we search for firewall, and now we have a new index with 176 documents so far. And if we want to look at the data, we go to data views and we'll create a new data view. I'll call it firewall syslogs index pattern firewall dash star. It will match all these indexes or indices we have here. The timestamp is @timestamp. We'll save. Now from the main menu, if we go to discover under analytics, this is the index or the data view that we created. We can see here a distribution of the documents or the logs over time that are received from the firewall. And we can open the details of every log or document in the Elasticsearch terms if we want to look at more details of the fields and their values. Now the last part we need to do is run Logstash as a service, because right now I'm running it with the command line manually. So I'm going to adjust the configuration file, and here in the output I'm going to comment out the standard output plugin so I don't send to the console, and I have it stopped from the other window. And to run Logstash as a service, we can use the system control command start logstash.service, and we can double check the status, and it's active and running. And here we go, we started receiving the data. After a few minutes, I stopped the command, or I stopped Logstash from running manually, and I started it as a service. So this was a quick demo of how to install and configure Logstash to ingest the syslogs of a firewall. Up next, configuring Filebeat. Now to install Filebeat, I'm going to use very simply the yum repository, just like I did for Logstash. I already have downloaded and installed a public signing key, and I already have a repository file called it logstash.repo. And all I have to do now is run the command yum install Filebeat. And because I don't want to fetch the latest, I'm going to install the specific version 8.14.3, just like my Elasticsearch nodes. Here we go, 8.14.3. I'm going to press on yes and get it downloaded and installed. Now we're going to the YAML file of Filebeat to configure the main options that will allow us to receive the data and send them to Elasticsearch. The first part is the filebeat.inputs. This configures Filebeat to monitor log files and read log files. The Filebeat config modules. This enables the modules in Filebeat in this directory, allowing predefined parsing for specific log types. In our case, we're going to enable the fortigate module. The template settings, for example, this is the number of shards for the index that we're going to save the data in. Under setup Kibana, we're going to specify the host, the Kibana host, and we're going to create this username so that Filebeat can load visualizations in Kibana. The output section, the output.elasticsearch, we're going to specify our Elasticsearch nodes with HTTPS, and we're going to enable SSL, and we're going to specify the CA certificate. This is copied from node 1 that I configured as a root CA from a previous video. I'm going to save this file, and we're going to enable the modules. And before we enable the modules, I'm going to show you the modules list. We can enable modules for all these common data types or common logs from different vendors. And we're going to enable the Fortinet one with the command Filebeat modules enable Fortinet. And I have it already enabled, so I'm going to the modules YAML file for Fortinet. And here we have the firewall section, and we have the client endpoint, and we have the FortiMail and FortiManager at the bottom. But right now we're only enabling the firewall. So we set this to true, and the input is UDP by default, or you can uncomment that. The syslog host is the IP address of this machine running Filebeat, and the port is 9004, and we're going to allow this on the local firewall. And right here on my firewall, I'm going to configure a syslog. Syslog number 1, I have it configured for Logstash. It's sending the syslogs to this port. I'm going to configure another syslog that will send the syslogs to Filebeat. Status enable, set server, the IP address of the ingestion server running Filebeat, and the port is 9004. And before we forget, we're going to create a user in Kibana that Filebeat will use to authenticate with Kibana and load visualizations in case Filebeat has any visualizations or dashboards that it wants to load in Kibana. So under management, security, users, we can create a user, and I'll call it my Kibana user. I'll put a password just to match what we have in the filebeat.yaml file, and give the user the Kibana admin role. It's a built-in role that allows Filebeat to load the dashboards into Kibana. I'll update the user. And now after we installed Filebeat, we configured filebeat.yaml, we configured the Fortinet module, and we opened the port, and I'll run the command filebeat setup -e to print the output here on the console. And this command allows Filebeat to load any dashboards and set up the index patterns and all the configurations in Kibana. And this command finished running, loaded ingest pipelines, and loaded any dashboards or visualizations from Filebeat. And now if we go back to Kibana under management and index management, here in the data stream, we see this new data stream, Filebeat, with the version of Filebeat running created. And we can set up a different name in the Filebeat YAML file, but I just kept it as default. And if we open the ingest pipelines here, we can see different pipelines loaded with that command, the Filebeat setup command. If we search for the Fortinet ones, and we can see these ingestion pipelines. These are used for parsing, one for firewall events and firewall UTM traffic. And if we open one of the ingest pipelines here, we can see all the processors here used to parse the traffic. But right now we don't have any traffic coming from the firewall until we start the Filebeat service. So back to our ingestion server that is running Filebeat. If we type in the command service filebeat start, it will start the service and it will start receiving the data from, or the syslogs from the firewall, ingesting them and sending them to Elasticsearch. Now back here on Kibana, if we open the menu here and we go to discover and we select Filebeat data view, we can see the data for the last 15 minutes here. It just started ingesting and just started showing up in our Kibana instance. And we can see all the fields here on the side with the correct field types, whether it's an integer or a string or a date type or an IP address here, for example, the Fortinet firewall IP. And we can open one of the documents here or the logs, and we can see all of the details inside of the log. In this video, we demonstrated how to ingest data into Elasticsearch using Logstash and using Filebeat. In the next video, we're going to take a look at using Kibana and all the different sections and applications it has. Stay tuned, and I will see you in the next one.